MIT의 첫 번째 기업가 정신 무크, 즉 스타트업 관련 온라인 교육 컨텐츠를 기획한 에딘 베시모프 팀장님의 발표가 있겠습니다. 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
It's a pleasure to meet you all. It's an honor to be here. My name is Erdin Beshimov, and I work with Bill, I work with Ri Young, and a number of other talented, passionate, just wonderful individuals at MIT, and we create MIT online courses on entrepreneurship and innovation. Our goal is to change the world. Ri, don't go. Actually, I want to say a few words about you. So before I say anything about what I'm supposed to say, come on, get on stage. I actually want to single out who I believe to be a real entrepreneur. This is a, don't be shy. Koreans are just far too shy. But Ri Young, a graduate of this school, let me tell you her story. She was a SBS, CNBC reporter here in Korea, in Singapore. And 6 months ago, she showed up on the doorstep of our office at MIT. And she said, guys, you know, what you're doing is very interesting. I'm writing a book on entrepreneurship. Let's collaborate. You have to bring entrepreneurship to Korea. And let me just start by helping translate your course into Korea. Right? She just showed up out of nowhere and made an offer, said, hey, let me do this for you. I think this is great. And then began working dawn to dusk on making it happen. And soon we'll be launching Bill's course, Entrepreneurship 101, in Korea, in Korean. And then she said, we really have to bring you to Korea. You got to come and meet the students. They're so passionate, bright, they're interested in entrepreneurship. And if you come to Korea, we'll also give you plastic surgery. And she made it all happen. And so the reason that this exists today is, you know, of course, it's the hospitality, the hard work of Ewha University, and this Ewha ambassador and alum, Ri Young. So I just want to raise our hands for this person who really is the reason that this is happening. Yeah, so thank you so much for making this happen. I'm going to use the stick, right? All right, cool. Well, you know, Ri Young asked me, it's like, hey, you know, can you come out to Seoul and let's talk about the importance of entrepreneurship, the importance of entrepreneurship education. And I thought about it, and actually at MIT, this question is very difficult to answer systematically because we just believe in it so hard. To us, it's not just a matter of the mind, it's a matter of the heart. How do you explain something that you love so passionately? And so I thought, well, perhaps a way to really talk about the importance of entrepreneurship is to tell you about a personal story of someone who became an entrepreneur, not because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but through a combination of life experiences, I was led to this realization of the importance of entrepreneurship and later the importance of entrepreneurship education. So actually, if you don't mind, I want to tell you about my personal story and what that story tells about the importance of entrepreneurship. Even though some say that I look Korean, I just want to say that I'm not Korean and that I was born in a country that no longer exists, the Soviet Union. And this is my hometown. It's a hometown of, it's a city of Osh in Central Asia. This is in sort of, for people who know about the Silk Road, this place is actually quite sacred. This is called the Suleiman Mountain, and it looks like a person is laying down. And actually a lot of pilgrimage happens to this town. It's a town of historical significance that used to lay on the trade route that brought spices from Asia to Europe. And you can actually see it in our local markets here, sort of the reflection of that historic trade route. And even though I'm in Korea literally for the first time, this is my first 48 hours in Korea ever, my experience with Korea began much earlier with, let's see, come on, with this man. Does anyone know who this person is? I know one person here knows. He does, and he shouldn't say, but does anyone here know who this person is? That's right. He's Korean. His name is Viktor Tsoi. And he is the biggest rock star. He was the biggest rock star in the Soviet Union. You know, people love K-pop. This is K-rock. And believe me, this is way better. This is great stuff. So his name is Viktor Tsoi. When you get a chance, check him out. But anyways, my first, because I grew up in the former Soviet Union, my first big experience in life that led me to entrepreneurship was I'm still mastering this, was the renaming of my hometown. It was 1992. The Soviet Union just broke down, suddenly disintegrated. Imagine if Korea suddenly disintegrates into 15 different countries. And I'm sitting in a classroom. Our teacher walks in and says, well, kids, you know, I just wanted to let you know that we don't live in the Soviet Union anymore. Our country is called Kyrgyzstan. And also, you might want to know, we were in 6th grade, little kids. Also, your hometown is no longer Frunze, but it is Bishkek. You know, our government decided to rename our town. And, you know, when you're a 6th grader, you don't really care, right? All you think about is kind of girls and like, oh, whatever, fine, doesn't matter. But as I thought about it later, in me and in many people in our society, it created this psychological condition where you don't believe that things will remain the same. It is actually very difficult for me psychologically to think that things are going to stay the same. And I think this is very helpful for entrepreneurship because, you know, a lot of us here, for example, we may think that Samsung is here forever and Hyundai is here forever. But for someone like me, it is impossible to believe that that can be the case. And so this sense of anticipation that things will change and likely change in a most dramatic fashion, this is fantastic preparation for life as entrepreneur. But as the Soviet Union broke down, a number of things happened. One of them that, you know, suddenly in our society, even though we weren't a rich country, but we weren't poor, everyone's kind of equal. Some of you may know a little about the Soviet Union. Suddenly, as soon as the Soviet Union broke down, a lot of people became very poor. Factories started breaking down, shutting down. 50% of the population lost their jobs. In fact, you know, many people would stay, even those, and those people who didn't lose their jobs, many of them weren't getting paid at all. We had people, relatives in our family who would work for 6 to 8 months without getting any kind of salary. This created a lot of political discontent. In fact, in the last 20 years, my country of Kyrgyzstan went through 3 revolutions. 3 times the government of a country was overthrown. And for my parents, of course, this was a concerning situation. You know, here you are, your country just collapsed. People are very poor in your country, and you've got to be worried for your children. Like, whoa, what's going on? And I learned some really important lessons from my parents that I think are, you know, very important, not just for entrepreneurship, but for life in general. What my mother told me, she said, well, you know, there is a lot of uncertainty. And when there is a lot of uncertainty around you, you have to create certainty within you. And so you create certainty within you by education. So son, don't worry about it. Things are happening. There's a lot of poverty, uncertainty. I don't know if when you grow up, you're going to be able to have a job. But if you just focus and study hard, your only job right now is to study hard. And if you focus on that and create certainty within, somehow things are going to work out. What my father did, he actually entered politics. He said, well, you know, I'm very unhappy about what's going on in our country. I'm very unhappy with the fact that, you know, some people are getting very rich because of corruption. They're exploiting their government posts to better themselves, while the majority of the population are extremely poor. And at the time, he was, let me try this again. At the time, he was working at this university in our hometown. And as soon as my dad entered politics and wrote an article that was critical of the government, he was fired. People came into his office, broke down the door, took things out. He was thrown out. And what's more, my mother was fired as well from her job. And for the next 2 years, my parents couldn't find a job. So that was kind of a very interesting situation for my family, where, my dad said, you really have to try to improve the world, and if you don't like what's going on, and you believe that it could be different, go and do something about it. But my realization early was that, hey, this has consequences. And when my family couldn't find jobs for 2 years, I started thinking at the time, that was really my first seed in thinking about entrepreneurship. I said, hey, actually in life, it is very important to have some form of independence, maybe financial independence, where you can lead a life that you think is right. You can express your opinions. You want to try to lead a life of freedom and not suffer grave consequences for that. That was just, as a child, that was my earliest thought, maybe entrepreneurship is really important. I didn't even know at the time that the word entrepreneurship exists. I was thinking about it from the standpoint of independence and financial independence. But because things were going pretty terribly in my country, I had to find a way to get out. And that's what I did. So I applied for a fellowship to go and study abroad in the United States. And I was lucky, I won one of those fellowships and went to a town in Indiana in the middle of nowhere. This is Aurora, Indiana, on the Ohio River. Tiny, tiny town, 3,000 people, formerly extremely racist. And, I showed up there. I didn't speak any English. And oftentimes I would walk on the street and people would pretend, like they're trying to speak to me in Chinese, and they would make funny faces or they pull their eyes and laugh about it. But it was a completely uncomfortable experience for me. I didn't speak any English, but I think later in life, even though I kind of hated it for long stretches of time, here I am in this sort of racist, hillbilly, redneck town. What am I doing here? But in the end, as I look back on it now, it was wonderful, because entrepreneurship, as Bill says, is actually about putting yourself out there into very difficult situations, and you have to get used, you have to become comfortable with the idea of not having any comfort. And that was my first time in life where, for a long period of time, I felt extremely uncomfortable and felt, in the end, profoundly comfortable with the idea of discomfort. I spent some time in Indiana, learned English, and then came back to Kyrgyzstan. And I was so hopeful. I said, oh, maybe, I would come back to my country and things would improve. Maybe, I have new ideas. I speak English now. Maybe I can improve the country. But actually, I was a little too idealistic, because, at the time, even the best graduates of our best universities only could get a job as a porter at this local hotel, which was the Hyatt. And I was like, well, screw that. I got to get out again. And so I left for England. I applied to school in England. I took a catalog of schools in other countries that offer scholarships to international students. And I said, well, I'm going to apply to all that offer scholarships, and whatever school gets me, that's where I'm going. And I ended up in northern England at the University of Bradford. Actually, this is the province of Yorkshire that was the birthplace of industrialization in the UK. And if you read Marx and the movement of people from the countryside to the cities working on factories, this is where it was born. And that was a very interesting time. When we talk about entrepreneurship and immigration, that was a time when I decided I'm never going back to Kyrgyzstan. I'm going to find every way to go someplace where I think I can find opportunity and make something of myself. But for someone, that was 2001, and if you recall, 9/11 happened, and later on the US went into Iraq. And for someone who is from a country with as STN and the end, Stan, it is very difficult to stay in England, to come to the United States, because you're from a country that is kind of suspected of terrorist behavior. But I said to myself, you know what, again, there is a lot of uncertainty outside. Let's create uncertainty within. And I spent 3 years in this apartment. It's beat up. I know it doesn't look like Seoul. In this beat up apartment in Bradford, Yorkshire, actually learning how to write. And at the time, I studied political science. And I said, you know what, I'm going to spend 3 years studying super hard. I'm going to try to get into a great graduate school where maybe in the United States and where I could find another opportunity to excel. And, you know, for 3 years, I would get up early in the morning, read, write, have lunch, read, write, go to bed again. And by complete luck, I ended up in 3 years, I applied to Harvard to do a graduate program in political science. And at the time, kind of suddenly, that's how I came to the United States. And when I stepped on the Harvard campus, the first time I stepped there, I had this thought like, wow, isn't that crazy that like this is a great institution, you can receive a lot of knowledge, but how come that only 50,000 people in Cambridge, 30,000 at Harvard, 20,000 at MIT can have access to this incredible education? Isn't there a way to bring more of this education to the world? That was literally, I remember that moment. I walked through and I was like, oh, there's something has to be done about it. But it took years before I started working on it. And as a student there, I studied political revolutions. I was still very much ingrained in academia, was not thinking about entrepreneurship. And as I studied political revolutions, I went to the country of Georgia. This is the city of Tbilisi. It's an old historic town. And I went there because it experienced one of the modern revolutions. It's called the Rose Revolutions, where people kind of went out and overthrew their president. And that phenomenon was very interesting to me. And I think for anyone interested in entrepreneurship, studying revolutions is very important. And I asked myself, well, how is it that suddenly people could rise up and overthrow their president that they weren't happy about? And if you look at revolutions, you realize one thing. For a revolution to happen, people need to realize, have public consensus that something is going wrong in their country. And what's challenging about that, in many societies that are kind of dictatorial, autocratic, it is very difficult for people to express to others that they're unhappy about something, because that can have consequences. And I started meeting with young groups of revolutionaries who made the revolution happen, and started finding out from them, well, how exactly did you guys do it? And I met some people who did something absolutely spectacular. You know how a lot of people listen to the radio when they're in their cars, and you can go on the radio. You can buy a radio spot where you can go and sort of have an advertisement, have some message. You can order a song. Well, a group of young guys, 19-year-olds, they went on the radio and said, well, we're going to go on the radio and we're going to buy a commercial. I said, fine. They show up, it's live radio, and in Tbilisi, everybody listens to the radio in their cars. And they say, people, and suddenly they're on live radio, and they say, people, if you are not happy about what's happening in your country, will you please beat the horn? And suddenly the city of Tbilisi erupted in people beating their horn. It became a deafening noise that lasted for 15, 20 minutes nonstop. And when you're in your car, you're protected, right? If you beat the horn and others do it, the consequences from doing that are not significant for you. But you express to everyone else that you are not happy. As soon as that happened, the revolution happened 2 days later. And so I'm sitting with Sam, and I'm studying them. I'm an academic, and I felt completely ashamed with myself. Whoa, these people are totally changing the world. They're young, passionate. They're really changing their country. And what am I doing? I'm really just kind of studying them, and that just didn't feel particularly useful to me. So I returned to Harvard. Told my advisor, hey, I'm leaving, I'm done with academia, and I'll try something else. And, oh, actually, I wasn't. So before I left Harvard, I also met a girl at Harvard. There she is with my daughters Maria and Lily. And the lesson here is, for those thinking about entrepreneurship, I think one of the most important decisions you're going to have to make is who you marry. Because entrepreneurship is so hard. Often you got to get up at 5 in the morning. You are home in the middle of the night. There are many, many family dinners that you skip. That unless you have a partner who understands it, who is on the same page with you, entrepreneurship is going to be very, very difficult for you. So for those of you interested in entrepreneurship, I say, hey, go and find the right husband or wife. And I also hear that girls in Korea have very high expectations, and that for guys in Korea it is very difficult to find a girl. So because it's a women's university, my message to the women here, just find someone you love and things are going to work out. So I left Harvard by complete luck, got a job at a startup. I got a job at a startup not because I wanted to get a job at a startup. It was because I couldn't get any other job. That was the only job I could get. But suddenly I started working there, and it clicked for me that, hey, if you care about change, startups are a great way to do it. Because what startups do, they create a whole new culture, they bring in people who like that culture, and they grow it. It's a form of counterculture and a model for changing society. When that realization hit me, I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm doing. This was the moment when all of these life experiences that I had connected into the single point of entrepreneurship. From then on, it became pretty straightforward. I thought, okay, I don't really have any skills that can make me a successful entrepreneur. I should come to MIT, became Bill's student, and started getting involved in activities. Helped found the MIT Entrepreneurship Review, which was a publication to promote thought leadership for entrepreneurs in sciences and technology. And it was actually Bill who hooked me up with this idea. He said, hey, Erdin, MIT is a thought leader for entrepreneurship, but we don't have any publication that promotes it. Would you be interested in kind of being together with a group of people to create it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Well, this is my professor at MIT. I can't say no. But that experience was quite transformative, because for the next 8 months of my life, I made it my priority at MIT. I was like, okay, Bill, I was like, well, it was Bill's idea. We have to make it succeed. I have to focus on, actually, I didn't focus on school. I got C in accounting. I got C in finance at MIT. And I have a 4.0 from MIT, which sounds impressive, but MIT is on the 5.0 scale. But this was it. And through that publication, I happened to meet, you see that gentleman, Nathan, in the very back. I happened to meet a number of really interesting individuals. All of them are a lot of them are doing, most of them are doing incredibly interesting things. Some of them are very successful entrepreneurs, investors already. But Nathan, he wasn't just an MBA student, he was also a PhD student in chemical engineering. And in our second year in MBA, he said, hey, Erdin, there is this kid in my lab, his name is Miles Barr, and he's got this technology that creates super thin solar cells, and he believes this can have significant commercial applications. Would you be interested in meeting with him? We met, I liked each other quite a bit, and then enrolled in Bill's class, New Enterprises, to work on it. And over the course of the next 6 months, we turned this from a simple technology into a startup that now is very successful. It's raised $7 million in venture funding. But I left the startup the year into Ubiquitous Energy and joined the venture firm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Actually, Bill was that was a view from my window from that office. But Bill was actually highly against me going into venture firms. Like, hey, Erdin, don't do it. You're going over to the dark side. This is not your character. And he was right. It was fascinating. It was highly prestigious. But in the end, it wasn't something that I loved very much. I really didn't care about venture capital. I didn't care about biotechnology venture capital. And ended up leaving 2 years later to start working again with Bill, with another person at MIT. His name is Sanjay Sharma. And we said, hey, actually, let's do something meaningful now. We believe that we can teach entrepreneurship. MIT has shown that. And now we have the ability to bring education to large audiences across the world through this new platform, edX, that we created. And so Bill and I started working on Entrepreneurship 101, and Hyun-Soo, who will speak later today, he was involved in that project. And we recorded lectures, put them up online, and something absolutely remarkable happened. Thousands of students started showing up in droves from every country in the world and interacting with us and sending messages to Bill like, Bill, you know, this course is the first time in my life that I see a path to financial independence. Exactly, actually, where I came from, my philosophical position. And in the last 2 years, this course became essentially the world's largest community for entrepreneurship education. Today, 300,000 students from every country in the world are members of this community. What we heard from the students in that course is that it's great to have skills for entrepreneurship that are taught in that course, but many of them don't have an idea for entrepreneurship. So we went out and partnered with another professor at MIT, his name is Eric Van Hippel, and created a course, User Innovation, that helps students come up with ideas for a startup. And I will finish this talk by saying that in the last week, MIT has made another radical decision in education, and it's further opening up the doors to MIT degrees for people around the world. It is introducing a system of online master's degrees where you can complete half of the master's degree online by taking MIT MOOCs, and for half of it come back to MIT for a semester of residential work. We are starting with an MIT program in supply chain, but are going to be working on extending this to other programs, and hopefully we'll work with Bill to create a certification program in entrepreneurship where you can spend some time doing it online and then come back and doing it on campus with Bill and other MIT entrepreneurship faculty. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here and talking to you, and if I can help you in any way, let me know.
Thank you.